Looking to catch up on the latest Star Wars books? Featuring sound effects and music directly from the movies, Star Wars audiobooks are the definitive listening experience. Try a Star Wars story you can only experience on audio with the brand new Star Wars audiobook original, Dr. Aphra, by Sarah Kuhn, read by an all-star cast including Mark Thompson, Catherine Tabor, Jonathan Davis, and more. Dr. Aphra is on sale now wherever audiobooks are sold.
This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee are two great friends of mine who are no strangers to Star Wars or podcasting. First, let's bring in the co-host of It's habit, Aaron. The co-host of Star Wars Reactions, Aaron Harris.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me back. It is habit. For the longest time, it was Rebels Reactions back in the day. But you know what? I am happy to be back. I feel like I've come home. So it's good to be back. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, buddy. Great to have you also joining us on the show. And we owe him one because we didn't have him on before the Rise of Skywalker, as we usually do right before a new Star Wars movie. Is the co-host of Idiots Array and about 17 other podcasts, Ryder Waldron.
Hey, Dan. Hey, Aaron. It's good to be with you guys, and I will forgive you, Dan, for not having me on The Rise of Skywalker, but maybe when these new movies come out in a few years, I can come back on that week. That would be great.
Yeah, we'll just send over your resume and we'll take it, look it over, and let you know how it goes.
Sure, I'll let you come through that for a couple of years.
Well, I mean, of course, it's just an absolute joy to talk to both of you. I consider you good friends, and the unfortunate thing about this year and no Star Wars celebrations, we don't get to hang out face to face, but at least we get to have this awesome conversation. It is going to be a great conversation because we are going to talk about Star Wars Rebels. Now, how does this topic come up, you might be wondering? Well, truth be told, through our quarantine and stuff, we've been doing all kinds of different things to entertain ourselves at the Zare household. And one of the things we've been doing is I've been showing Mason slowly but surely all of Rebels. Well, this past week, we watched the last, I'd say, half of season 4, and Mason had never seen it. And I was just reliving those moments and those experiences and the power of this series and how much it means to me. So many of us, I know that both of you are huge Rebels fans as well. Mason was completely blown away by it, the power of it. His friends had let him know about the fate of Kanan, so that wasn't news for him. But how it happened was. And then in a great dad moment, I would say about a year ago, he was accidentally flipping through TV and he found Andy's show where they would always, Rebels Recon. And he happened to watch the one with A World Between Worlds, so he knew about Ahsoka coming back too. But either way, he was still really surprised and moved by the end of that season. I think it's, it's great, but I'm enough babbling on my end. Aaron, for you, tell me about Rebels and kind of what the series means to you before we get into it.
Oh man. You got all night? I tell you, Rebels is probably when it comes to Star Wars, takes up the majority of my world. I came in late on the Clone Wars. I came in at about season 4, so I never had that connection. And I was a huge original trilogy fan to begin with, and when that first teaser hit for Rebels, and you heard the TIE fighters and you saw the stormtrooper, it felt like I was coming home. And it just, when the series started, I just fell in love with everything about it, from the way the new characters, the way they explored a timeline that we knew about, but we'd already seen one side of the story. What we knew about the Civil War was what was in the movies. This showed us a completely different side of a story that I already loved, and it made me love it even more. I loved I mean, everything this show brought in one of probably what is my favorite character of all time now, in Chopper. So this show just means, oh gosh, it means everything to me. It's just so in depth. It's deep on so many levels, yet it's fun and entertaining. The cast was stellar, and I'm going to kind of rein myself in, or else I'll just go all night. So, I love this show. I love Rebels.
Yeah, I would echo just about everything that Aaron just said. I really do love Rebels. I love Clone Wars. I love everything about, all Star Wars. But the thing I like about Rebels is that it had the perfect mix of classic characters coming back, but not totally taking over the story. We follow one timeline with some new characters that have been very endearing, very important. I really loved Kanan. He was kind of a broken Jedi at the first of the show, and ended up being this selfless hero by the end of his arc. And there was so much emotion in it. I rewatched a few scenes today just to get ready for this, and I couldn't believe how into it I was. I mean, it felt like when I was watching one of the movies, and I love the emotion. I love the emotion during lightsaber battles. I thought it was a perfect length. 4 seasons was enough to tell the story without feeling like it was being drawn out just to fill time. And I just really appreciate what they did with this, and I like all these characters. It was just a fun show to follow.
It really is tremendous. The power of the storytelling. For a lot of these episodes I hadn't seen since they originally aired. So while I knew the overall plot of each episode, I've forgotten a lot of the nuance and certainly a lot of the dialogue and some of the action sequences. And it's still extremely riveting. It's still emotional to me. Truth be told, and it's hard to sort of explain this, but I think you'll both understand. For me, if I was to take Star Wars Rebels as a whole, I would probably put it towards the upper echelon of my Star Wars movies. Like, I would put it above quite a few of the Star Wars films themselves because of... Now, I mean, in a way that's not really fair, because you can tell a lot more story in a TV series. You have just more time, more face time with the characters. But how the story's made, plotted, and told, and how it's integrated into everything else, I think is pretty brilliant. Which is why tonight is the top 5 most important things about the series Star Wars Rebels. So I've asked our friends to come up with the top 5 things for them that are the most important about the series overall. And of course, this can go just about anywhere, just sort of how it affects all of us. But I'm looking forward to diving in. Aaron, what is your number 5?
Well, my number 5 actually is the characters of this show. Dave Filoni and crew created a cast of characters that nobody had heard of, brand new, fresh out of the box, and made us fall in love with them so easily. They gave us complex, and they weren't just, troopers and rebels and smugglers. They gave us a family of rebels, a family cell, and they weren't perfect people. They were broken people. I think Ryder said it best. Kanan was the broken Jedi. Hera was the glue that kind of held them all together. Sabine was the lost child trying to find herself again after leaving the academy. Then you have Ezra, who has nothing to lose. And then you got Zeb, who's just got a grudge to pick with the Empire. I mean, you have a very mesh of probably the most incompatible people you could have. And they just melded so well together. And a lot of that is attributed to the writing. The cast, the voice cast, did a phenomenal job bringing these characters to life. And I think if it wasn't for having a base cast like this, with Kanan and Ezra, Sabine, that we would not have, the show would not have been as huge of a success as it was. The characters were very well, that just came out totally wrong, but they were very well organized and developed and fleshed out in so many levels that it just kept you on the edge of your seat, and you could relate to them, which is what I loved about it too.
So I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of what Aaron said, and I guess my fifth most important thing, and I'm not sure that I have these in any order, but since Aaron brought this up, I think the most important thing that I noticed is that these stories and these characters add to the movies. And so I can go back and I can see Maul and Obi-Wan fight, and I think, oh my gosh, that adds so much to episode 1. And when we see Obi-Wan go through episode 2 and 3, when the Grand Inquisitor dies and he says that there are some things more frightening than death, I take it that he's referring to Darth Vader. And that adds to Vader's aura, persona, or whatever in the movies. And so I really appreciated what the Clone Wars did to add to those characters, but I feel like Rebels did this more on a macro level. It added a lot to all of the movies, where the Clone Wars added more to individual characters, Anakin, Obi-Wan, whatever, to the movies. But this series just magnified so much that happened, and now I can go back and watch these movies and think, oh yeah, remember when that happened in Rebels? Man, that really adds some flavor to this movie, and so that would be one of my important things.
Two great starts, gentlemen. I couldn't agree more. There's the power of these characters and sort of how they make us feel and pull us into the story is paramount to telling a good story. And like you'd said, I believe you said, Ryder, 4 seasons was just the right amount to tell a story without sort of stretching things out or dragging them on, because that ultimately doesn't serve the story. And this knew how to do it well. Another thing it did well, and this is my number 5, is it made me believe in the Jedi in the galaxy before Luke Skywalker. Now, what I mean by that is when I had heard that there were going to be 2 new Jedi on this series, I had a really hard time with that, because I thought, no, Luke is a new hope. There have been no Jedi besides Obi-Wan and Yoda since, for 19 years, or actually it's going to be more about 14 years for this one. But that's a long time, and part of the power of Luke being a new hope is that there's no Jedi out there. And then we start to add to the mythology. Inquisitors become a necessity. The fact that some Jedi actually escaped Order 66, and they're frightened, and they're on the run, and they've had to sort of abandon who they are for survival. And Kanan and Ezra fleshed this out, made it believable, put a different sheen on this legend, and made it more palpable to me. I guess because it's hard to imagine the Jedi, at their peak would have truly been completely eradicated without a few kind of sneaking through the cracks. I mean, they are survivors. They are skilled warriors and peacekeepers. And the fact that they were able to do that and sell me on that and do it in such a way that I don't even bat an eye anymore. And when someone like Cal Kestis shows up or another Jedi shows up, I think, well, I don't imagine all the impact on the overall story that Kanan and Ahsoka and Ezra do, but I can see now why it happened. I still think they need to keep those things at a minimum. Like the shark in Jaws or Darth Vader, the less of them is more powerful, is better.
Yes.
But the way that they did it, I thought was a masterstroke. And it's hard to talk about Rebels without being hyperbolic, because I think that's tricky. But there's a lot to love about this, and I think that is a pretty important reason why.
Excellent. I love that.
So, Aaron, what about you? What's your number 4?
You just did my number 4.
Oh, okay. Ryder. Just kidding.
That was my number 4, was actually the expansion of the mythos when it comes to Luke not being the last Jedi, and there being other Jedis that survived Order 66. Because I remember when I first started hearing rumblings about Rebels, and there was going to be these Jedi that were going to still be out there. My first thought was, well, doesn't that kind of cheapen out Luke's story? And gosh, they did it so well. I don't even think of that anymore. It was so well put together and done, and they explained it off so well. And like you said, Dan, you don't even think twice when the Fallen Order came out and Cal Kestis is running around now. That just it's more believable. Yes, Jedi survived Order 66, not just Obi-Wan, not just Yoda. I mean, there are others out there. They may not have the impact that these characters have. And of course, like you said, fewer the better. But it is wholeheartedly believable. And that's something that before the show, I wouldn't have even considered, as an option. No, they can't be any other Jedi. Luke's the last one. Yoda's dead. Obi-Wan's dead. Luke's it. Luke and Leia. That's it. So yeah, that was my number 4.
I love it. Hey, great minds, right? Very cool.
Exactly.
Ryder, what about you?
Yeah, so my number 4, well, this is a little side note that Darth Maul's teeth have gotten much better in Rebels if you compare them to Phantom Menace.
Well, he's had
better dental
time
plan.
to learn about flossing.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, he's had a lot of time to improve things. But my real number 4 is the flaws that it shows in some of the characters that we hold on a high pedestal. And where this came from was the Maul versus Obi-Wan lightsaber battle at the end of season 3, towards the end of season 3. Obi-Wan has been on Tatooine forever. He's content, I guess. I mean, at least he's not out seeking conflict, things like that. Maul is full of hate, and he is driven by his hate for Kenobi to keep him alive. And we hear at the end that when Maul is being held by Obi-Wan Kenobi, he asks him, "Is he the chosen one?" referring to Luke, who Obi-Wan is watching over. And Obi-Wan, without hesitation, says, "Yes, he is." And I assume he's talking about Luke Skywalker. Well, we know. I don't think that's true. I think it's still Anakin. But we can see that Obi-Wan gets blinded by things sometimes, and he is flawed just like other characters. And I love a flawed character. That's why I like Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. He's a flawed character, but his story makes sense. And I like that it really, this battle really kind of enhances the personalities of Maul and Obi-Wan, but it also shows their flaws. Obi-Wan has flaws. Darth Maul, he is driven by hate. He's this amazing warrior, but then this old man takes him down in like 30 seconds. And it's just exciting. It didn't make sense at the time. I was waiting for this big, amazing battle. And then it's like, oh, that was over so fast. And wow, that was awesome. And wow, that made perfect sense. And we don't need these big drawn out battles all the time to really make them meaningful.
That's another great point. Mine is sort of similar to that, but it sort of takes it in a different route. And for me, I really like what you said about Obi-Wan, because I think that's important. I think the more opportunities we get to see these characters in the Star Wars sandbox, then you've got a real challenge, a real dilemma as a storyteller, because sometimes it can resort to feeling gimmicky. And that's actually my number 4. They tied in the entire mythology of Star Wars in the right way. Lando Calrissian, Hondo, Ahsoka, Mon Mothma, the list goes on and on. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Darth Vader, Grand Moff Tarkin, all these different characters from multiple eras of Star Wars. And whenever they're in, they truly add and accentuate the story. It doesn't feel forced, and it doesn't feel like a gimmick where I'm being asked to buy another action figure, although I would have anyway. And it doesn't feel like it's a ploy to attract viewers who are not interested in Rebels because they are familiar with other aspects of the Star Wars mythology. They tie these things in and manage to not only add to Rebels and make the cast of the Rebels and the Ghost important to the overall arching narrative, but also they manage to add to the legacy of these existing characters that we already know and love. Even Leia. When Leia was in there, she was only in one episode, but what she did and how she started to establish herself while she was still very much, covert, it just made me appreciate even more and sort of speculate on what she must have been like as the Empire was rising, and so was the quietly ascending rebellion, as we see in Claudia Gray's novel, Leia, Princess of Alderaan. Just overall, the way they were able to tie all of this in together and build on the mythology. And I think the last couple episodes of season 4 especially truly prove that they've taken characters they've introduced in the series, as well as characters from Star Wars overall, and put them all together in this big melting pot, and you've got this recipe that's delicious and genius.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, I like that they didn't overuse some of the cameos from the characters we already knew, but they had them in there just enough to keep the story flowing and make it interesting, make it meaningful, and not feel kind of hokey.
And yeah, like if Luke was in it, I would have been extremely disappointed.
Yeah.
He shouldn't be in it, and he was in it for like 2 seconds, and from a distance, and that is as it should be.
Yep, perfect.
Aaron, were you going to say something about?
No, I was just agreeing with everything you said, because it was a perfect mix, bringing in those classic characters just enough to make those markers into what was already established through the movies, which I'm going to kind of hold back on because that goes into my next point. So,
of course. Well, speaking of, what is your number 3?
Well, number 3 was basically how well the series bridged the gaps between the movies and the Clone Wars, as well as the other books and other items like that. It's very much a strong storytelling at that point, because you have these series of movies, you have these books that have been out there and they're established and they are well documented, and then you got you have Clone Wars, which was a huge success. Then you get Rebels, and then all of a sudden this one series is connecting all of them together. We have couple characters from Clone Wars being pulled in. We are literally interacting with the characters from the movies. We are having characters from Rebels in movies. Chopper. I can tell you, when I sat there and watched Rogue One and saw Chopper roll across the screen, I screamed. I was the only person screaming in the theater because nobody else knew who he was, but I did, and that's all that mattered. And it was great. Then when they started bringing in then when they brought Thrawn in from the expanded universe at that point, or the Legends as what it's called now, and brought him into canon and brought him in. I tell you, just the way it branches out and touches all aspects of what's out there in the books, in the movies, in Clone Wars, it just made the series even more whole. And you can't watch Clone Wars, you can't watch the movies without thinking of that, like it was said earlier, without thinking of the impact, man, what happened in Rebels. And that was my number 3.
I love it, and I'm glad you brought up Thrawn, because I'd forgotten about him, but they did. That was sort of a tricky task too, in knowing that Timothy Zahn had input in helping create this character and bring him, onto the animation side of things was pretty cool.
Oh, absolutely, and I'm glad they brought him back in to help bring him in, and even brought him in to write his backstory in the books too. So, because they completely, it was a great story that he wrote up in those books. So it's great. I was glad they brought him in.
Definitely. Yeah, and they didn't let the Rebels defeat him and make him look stupid. They kept his aura about him, his intimidation factor and everything like that, but they still didn't let the Rebels get wiped out by him either. So it was kind of a tricky story to tell, but they did a very good job of it. Exactly. My number 3 would just be Kanan overall. I love the character of Kanan. I love that he was grumpy and didn't want to teach Ezra. He didn't have all the answers for Ezra when he says, do or do not, there is no try. And Ezra's like, what does that mean? And Kanan's like, I don't know. That's just something Yoda said. Like, who knows? Actually, I do know where you can find out what it means, though, because Dan Zare wrote an amazing article about it on StarWars.com.
Thank you.
But I love what Kanan brought. I love that he had this, partway through the series, he had this disability where he was blinded, and he still was not a character that just sat on the sidelines. He showed that a disability does not make you meaningless to a story or make it so you can't participate or do anything. And it is just cool what he did when he died for Hera and Ezra and Sabine and everyone else at the end there. he is holding off the flames from the fuel cells. He's looking at Hera, and you can hear this haunting music coming up, and it's like, oh man, something bad's going to happen. And as he force pushes Hera back into Ezra's arms, his eyes become clear. They're not foggy like they were. And I just love the end of that episode. And the Star Wars logo comes up, and it's in black and white, and it's just quiet. And I just love that. It's something that I think we all, as parents, would love to think that we would do for our spouse and our kids, but Kanan did it on the screen, and I just love to live vicariously through characters like that. And it was the first death of an animated character, I think, that really hit me as much as an on-screen movie character's death. It really struck me and made me emotional. And I can remember watching it with my kids and thinking, this is a cartoon, and I'm like getting teared up over an animated character. And it was just a really great episode.
Yeah, well said. That one was moving for Mason as well, and then the way you mentioned that it ended, and they also have like some ash kind of floating around.
Yeah.
On the screen too, and I got choked up again, and I of course knew it was going to happen. And Mason said to me, "Daddy, I can tell this is the one where Kanan dies." And I said, "How can you tell?" He said, "Because of the picture and the way he's sitting at that table, and the fact that it's called Jedi Knight. This must be when he becomes a Jedi Knight." And I thought that was a pretty astute observation. You mentioned the metaphor of his eyes, how he sees clearly now. He sees his purpose, and he finds peace, which is a wonderful theme in Star Wars with Jedi. And actually, it's like we're all hive-minded on this, because my number 3 is also Kanan, but it's Kanan and Ezra and their relationship. They're master and Padawan, but they're also very much friends or brothers. My son said he thought they were like father and son, but I don't think so. I do think they're like brothers that have wonderful, deep respect for one another. And I appreciate you mentioning my article for StarWars.com, Ryder, because that's what I was going to bring up as far as Kanan at first is reluctant because he's afraid. And he doesn't think he'll be a good teacher. He tries to pawn him off on Luminara, who he hopes and thinks is going to be alive, and she isn't. Another trick by the Inquisitor and the Empire. And he just thinks he'll fail him. He doesn't know. Ezra doesn't care. He just wants to find community. He wants to find a relationship. He's hungry to learn more. And he feels rejected, not because of the Force, but because he looks at this guy like a surrogate brother or family. And they accept one another, and they grow throughout the series. But there's no hand-holding. There's no cajoling. There's no angst that kind of permeates things like with Anakin and Obi-Wan. They have an extremely different relationship as friends, as brethren, as people who are Force sensitive. And they grow in the Force together. They grow as people. Kanan learns to accept all of who he is, accept his role. He learns to let go and let Ezra make mistakes. Ezra, there's a hot minute where you think he might turn to the dark side. Not only does he reject the dark side, but he completely, alongside Kanan, encapsulates what I think the Jedi are supposed to be. And if you were to say to me, who are the Jedi that actually get it throughout this entire story, I would say it's Ahsoka easily. It's Kanan, although it takes a while. And it's certainly Ezra. Qui-Gon, I think, would be up there too. And Luke is as well, but Luke takes pretty much his entire adult life to figure that out. We're not talking about powerful. We're talking about who gets the overall message. I mean, even Yoda for a long time didn't quite get the message. But Kanan and Ezra do. I think they are the perfect tandem. I think if Kanan and Ezra were in the position in the galaxy that Anakin and Obi-Wan were, then there would be no Rise of the Empire, quite honestly. And I just think they're a wonderful team. Let's go ahead and take a quick break. When we come back, Aaron, Ryder, and I will finish our list of the top 5 most important things about Star Wars Rebels. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Looking to catch up on the latest Star Wars books but can't find the time? Try listening to them on audio, featuring sound effects, top-notch narrators, and music directly from the movies. Star Wars audiobooks are the definitive listening experience. Are you looking for a Star Wars story you can only experience on audio? Try the brand new Star Wars audiobook original, Dr. Aphra, by Sarah Kuhn, read by an all-star cast including Mark Thompson, Catherine Tabor, Jonathan Davis, and more. Dr. Aphra is on sale now. Visit penguinrandomhouseaudio.com/Star Wars to listen to clips and find your next listen, or buy now wherever audiobooks are sold. MEI and Mouse Fan Travel is your one-stop shop for your vacation needs and your plans to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, or the cruise lines. Travel looks much different now than it did a couple of months ago, and with the opening of Walt Disney World and soon, hopefully, the opening of Disneyland, you need a place to go where you can trust, and they will help you figure out and navigate all the different circumstances and guidelines that Disney has put out for you. And I can say that we had our vacation modified, and as soon as dates were announced, MEI contacted me directly to help me reschedule, which is exactly what I was hoping to do. So if you are interested in rescheduling your vacation or want to try to plan a Walt Disney World, Disneyland vacation, or anywhere else you want to go on the planet, be sure to contact MEI and Mouse Fan Travel at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefan-travel. Their signature service and expert advice will help you maximize your vacation time and dollar, and they will help you figure out all the different changes and modifications going on at the Disney theme parks. They are amazing, and I can tell you, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, the peace of mind that Becky Menken and the crew at MEI and Mouse Fan Travel have given me is invaluable. If you're interested at all, again, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefan-travel. We are back down to our last two things that we feel are the most important about the series Star Wars Rebels. And I'm sure, gentlemen, as we're going through this and we're all conversing and sharing our thoughts, you're thinking of lots of other things. So we'll try to do some honorable mentions here at the end, of course, as time allows. These top 5 lists, both on our Facebook Live every Monday night at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time, as well as on our CWK Pour-Over Patreon shows, have been so popular. So this is just a great formula. Thrilled to be able to share the mic with you too. And Aaron, we are back to you and your number 4.
My number 4 is actually looking at the different view of a familiar setting. And to me, that was huge for this show, because we all grew up watching the original trilogy. We saw the 2 battles of the Death Stars. We saw Empire Strikes Back, A New Hope, and Return of the Jedi. We know the Empire was evil. We know they blew up Alderaan. We know they're bad and they have to go down. We got all that from the movie. But what's great about this show was it gave us that point of view from a different perspective. We got to see the evil of the Empire on how that impacted the everyday citizen of the Empire, because we saw in the opening episodes, and we saw it throughout other episodes, how the Imperials harassed the people of Lothal, how they were just constantly mixed in and taking stuff and belittling and just constantly oppressing the people. And we got to see it, when they first showed Tarkin Town in the first episode, I was like, oh my Lord. Yeah, this is why the Empire was bad. This is why they were fighting. This is why the Empire had to go down, was stuff like this. And just seeing that new perspective on that galactic conflict definitely was huge for me, and I think it definitely changed my perspective watching the other movies as well, because you could see the evil, you've seen the evil, and now you know why it needs to go down.
Yeah, that's excellent.
I love that.
Yeah, that's really good. So my 4th one is the connection between Ahsoka and Anakin. And I love in Twilight of the Apprentice when Vader comes in on the top of a TIE fighter, and it's a very Anakin thing to do. You can tell he still is Anakin Skywalker in there. And at this point, Ahsoka thinks she knows who is inside the armor. But Vader says Anakin Skywalker was weak, and and Vader destroyed him, which is almost exactly what Kylo Ren says to Han Solo on the bridge in The Force Awakens. And then Ahsoka proceeds to say, well, I will avenge his death. And Vader says, revenge is not the Jedi way. And Ahsoka says, I am no Jedi. And I love that Ahsoka has become even more than a Jedi. She has become what the Jedi should have been all along. She's very pure with her white lightsabers. I love that when she cuts open Vader's mask, it partly humanizes him again, but he's still angry. He still wants to kill her, and she is even saying, "I won't leave you, not this time." And it's like made me think, does she feel responsible for, leaving the Jedi Order and that contributing to Anakin's fall to the dark side? Maybe. I don't know what kind of guilt she carries there, but Vader, he just says after that, "Then you will die." And that season ends, and we don't know if Ahsoka's dead. Looking back, I mean, obviously we know that she lived through that, but we didn't know she could have been dead at that point. And we didn't know what the future held for her. But I love that when we got to see Vader's mask cut open and get to see Anakin's eye, and you can hear a mix between Anakin's voice and Vader's voice. And that is just one of the most powerful lightsaber battles of any in Star Wars, because there is so much emotion between these two, just like Vader and Luke on the Death Star in Return of the Jedi. There's so much emotion. They know who each other is, and they probably don't want to kill each other, but they also have to fight, and it just really put me on the edge of my seat to watch that.
I love, that,
Yes.
I'll never forget that, how amazing that was, just how powerful that was. And the thrill of seeing Vader again. I mean, that whole second season of Star Wars Rebels is just unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Just so good. My number 4 is a little more specific to a character arc, and it's the redemption of Hondo Ohnaka. I love Hondo. I didn't love him when I first met him in Clone Wars, but I don't know that we were meant to, but Jim Cummings was so darn charismatic. Hondo started to permeate Star Wars culture a little bit, at Galaxy's Edge. There's some novels. There's even a book told from Hondo's perspective that ties into his relationship with Han and Chewie. And then there's I think the penultimate episode, Hondo agrees to help because he says he would do anything for that boy. And he's talking about Ezra and the impact that Ezra has on him. And that was so moving to me. That this scoundrel, this pirate, would be moved like this by Ezra is just great. It's great storytelling. This character isn't this stagnant, conniving trickster that is always doing the wrong thing. There's a little bit of hope for him, and he slowly over time starts to kind of change his colors while still being Hondo and still being a bit duplicitous and deceitful, but with much better intentions and results. And I thought that was a really, really fun aspect of this story. So that's my number 4.
That's good, because I think I kind of felt like you when we first saw Hondo in the Clone Wars. I thought, man, I wish somebody would kill this guy. And then in Rebels, he really became a character that was kind of endearing. And I think the best Star Wars characters, it seems like, have kind of this good side and bad side, and a little bit of gray area, and you don't know which way they're going to go. But yeah, Hondo definitely became a character I liked by the end of Rebels.
Well, yeah, no, I definitely agree with all of that. I remember when he first popped up on the screen in Rebels, I was like, seriously? All the characters you could have brought over, you're bringing Hondo? and by the end of it, I was like, we need more Hondo. Hondo! We need more Hondo. And he definitely became a beloved character by the end of Rebels. But I remember when he first popped up on screen, I'm like, oh, come on, you're kidding me, right? But they just fleshed him out so well in this series, and to see his growth was incredible.
Very much so. And so it looks like we're down to your last one, Aaron.
Oh boy. And it's my last one of the top 5. Okay. Let's get that. I could talk Rebels forever. But for all intents and purposes, number 1 in this top 5, what made Rebels so important was the expansion of the Force. We got to see the expansion of the mythology of the Force in this series between Kanan training Ezra. But then when we got down into it, we got to see more of when the Mortis trilogy started coming back into from Clone Wars started coming back into this series, and we got into the world between worlds and episodes, and we got to see something fleshed out that we had never seen before, and seeing that the mythos of Star Wars expanded so much, and the myth of the Force and the expanded in that way was just I still can't wrap my head around everything they did in those episodes. And it just was such an incredible move and an incredible expansion that I could sit here and study World Between Worlds day after day for 10 years and still come up with new stuff that I'm learning from that episode. It's just that in depth. And that's why that's my number one is the expansion and the in-depth expansion of the mythos.
I love it. Well said. So isn't it so cool again that we're kind of going over similar stuff? We have different ways of explaining it. I love hearing your guys' perspectives.
Yeah, that's really cool. I was going to mention World Between Worlds 2 and also the Bendu. And these are things that we've never seen in Star Wars movies, but when they were in Rebels, like, yeah, that makes sense. That it's different. It makes sense though, and I enjoy that. And I like when they expand things, but don't make it totally weird and take you out of the story. And they didn't do that in Rebels. I don't think this is my number one because I think I got too excited and talked about my number one already. But one of my top 5 is the end of Rebels when Sabine and Ahsoka are going off to look for Ezra. And it's very difficult to end a series in a satisfying way. I mean, there's been multiple TV series over the years that have been excellent, but then they kind of dropped the ball in the last episode. Rebels not only didn't do that, they made me excited for more stories in this timeline. And when Sabine has made that last picture and she is leaving with Ahsoka, and Ahsoka's just standing there in those white robes, and I'm thinking, my gosh, that is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And then they get in, and Sabine says, Ezra's out there somewhere, and they're going to look for him. And it just made me excited that there could be some more stories that follow Rebels. And I'm not sure that I want a Rebels sequel series. I would just maybe like, if we're going to get a Rebels spin-off series that, maybe it's Ahsoka and Sabine out there in the galaxy looking for Ezra. I would imagine we get some Thrawn in there, something like that. But I like that they stuck the landing on the series finale, and it just really, really felt good to watch the last episode of that series.
It's hard to end a series, especially one with the kind of love and the care and the fan appreciation that one has, but I feel like they nailed it.
Yeah.
Clone Wars had a couple more chances because we thought the series ended about 3 times. But they did it great too. But this was like exceptional because you actually end one story and open up possibilities for something else while still resolving all of the threads and the plot threads. And I think that is, again, the key to good storytelling. So my number 5 is sort of similar to what the both of you said, shock. But for me, it's how Star Wars Rebels added to the mystery of the Force. It introduced a lot of different aspects of the Force, Force-sensitive animals and creatures and sentient creatures, and how they respond to the Force and how they carry on the Force in their own way, not through a mind trick or telekinesis or a Force jump, but through being able to be a conduit for Kanan or Ezra with the Loth Wolves or the Loth Cats, or even how Ezra relates to the Purgils or the Fear Nox. All very important stuff. Kanan's understanding of the Force and what it means to be a teacher. And of course, A World Between Worlds, one of the most jaw-dropping moments in the history of fiction in my mind, because of what it did and how it drastically altered the Force and our perception of time and space in this galaxy far, far away in such a degree that I never thought it was going to happen. And when you can take a story that's over 40 years old and add new wrinkles to it that truly add to it, again, I'm a broken record, but it wasn't a gimmick. It wasn't just, I feel like comic books, I love comics. I've been collecting comics most of my life, but I go through long bouts where I stop buying them because I feel like creators spend more time putting their spin on the story than embracing the story and adding to it. And Rebels, what it did with the Force, added to the story. It wasn't Dave Filoni or someone else saying, hey, I want this to be something that I added, something that is uniquely me. It's more like, let's add to this masterpiece. Let's add to this canvas and make it even more nuanced and more special. And that's exactly what they did. I will always be forever grateful to Star Wars Rebels because of A World Between Worlds and what it added to the Force.
Excellent. Love it.
Well, thank you, sirs. Aaron, anything you want to add to Rebels and sort of the importance of it for you and for the story before we wrap things up?
With Rebels, there's always so much you can talk about. One of the things I just throw out there as an honorable mention was how I kind of mentioned how it bridged gaps here and there. But when one of the things that really stuck out to me was one particular episode, The Last Battle, which pretty much was almost like a closing of the Clone Wars per se. It was because at that time we had the abrupt, at the time we'd only had that abrupt ending of the Clone Wars. We had gotten the lost episodes, which just told more stories, but it didn't really wrap up and close down the Clone Wars like season 7 just did. But that one episode when you have Rex going up against the battle droids again, and it had that Clone Wars feel to it, and just kind of felt like a closing of that story that we didn't get before. So that was a huge piece for me that I felt needed to be mentioned out there. And of course, Ryder mentioned earlier the Twin Sons episode with the Maul and Kenobi fight, which was just mind blowing in and of itself. So there's just some great stories in this series that I can sit there and list every episode and tell you why it's a great episode, but I'm not going to do that. So we got time constraints here, but there are a lot of great stories, and that's just a couple to throw out there, to say the least.
I love it. And Ryder, what about you? Any last minute thoughts on Rebels?
Dave Filoni was the voice of Chopper. How cool is that?
That was stinking awesome.
That was awesome. I love that it explained how there were different Rebel cells, so we understand why the Rebel Alliance is actually called the Rebel Alliance. It's an alliance of different cells. It's just it's a great series. I like the Inquisitors, that Vader had these underlings that were force sensitive, could use lightsabers, but they weren't Sith, so it didn't take away from the rule of two, things like that. So it was just a well done series. You don't have to explain away a lot of the things that happen. They just make sense. They fit, and they fit with the movies too, which is I gotta think that's a nearly impossible thing to do, to make it fit with other series and comics, novels, and movies especially. So they just well done by all the creators that worked on this.
Some of my favorite Star Wars storytelling occurs in Rebels for all the reasons that we talked about, and many other reasons too. I'm glad you mentioned Chopper, Aaron, which I knew you would because I know he's your boy. I used to joke when Rebels reaction started that I was going to get a Chopper tattoo because I didn't see the appeal of Chopper. And then there was the episode where he knocked that other droid out of the space fighter, starship, and I loved him. And I'm not like a pugilistic person, but for some reason that just struck me as hilarious. And I like the feistiness and the gumption. And he slowly became one of my very favorite characters in all of Star Wars. He's pretty awesome and funny. And then he has heart when Hera is grieving the loss of Kanan. He extends a hand and holds her hand. And I thought that was as much of a tearjerker as anything. I love Kanan, absolutely, as we mentioned. And then the way they use Vader, it was really, this was before Rogue One. It was the first time we really got to see Vader cut loose in that sort of a way. When I saw the first episode at Celebration, I remember yelling at the screen along with so many of us, "Run!" Because I was terrified for Kanan and Ezra, because I knew Vader was no joke and that they were not going to beat him. And the fact that they used him effectively the way that they did, even that scene where Callus is talking with Vader, and there's this great angle where they show Callus looking at Vader, and all you see of Vader is Vader's hand moving, and every time he clenches his hands, Cal stares at that hand with complete fear because he's probably afraid that Vader's going to choke him or do something else. It's just great. Aaron, I cut you off. Go ahead, buddy.
No, I just wanted to add to you were talking about the emotional state of Chopper and everything. And to me, and I love you, and I'm glad you brought up the when he held Hera's hand at the end when Kanan died. But to me, the one scene that showed the most emotion from Chopper was in, I believe it was the episode Hera's Heroes, when they end up back on Ryloth and they're at Hera's home. And as they're walking in, and Hera and Ezra are disguised, and Chopper's got that different paint, the Imperial paint job, as they're undercover. And Chopper just kind of stops in front of a crashed Y-Wing, and you find out that's the one that Hera pulled him from during the Clone Wars, and saved him when his Y-Wing crashed. And you see him just sitting there staring at it, and you can hear the little beeps going, as he's remembering his life before Hera. And to me, that was just a very emotional gut punch for a droid too, nonetheless. Was very humanizing for a droid. So I wanted to throw that one out there too.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
As we begin to wrap up the show, I want to thank each of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to have a cup of coffee with me, and for helping to spread the word about our Star Wars family we've got here at Coffee with Kenobi. Be sure to tune in Monday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/live or www.facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi, and have a cup of coffee, tea, or any beverage of your choosing with me as we continue the conversation. To join us in the CWK Cafe, which is our Facebook group, and share your Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions in a family-free, spoiler-free place that is also drama-free, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/community and be a part of the conversation, talk about this week's show, or just talk some Star Wars. It is a lot of fun, and you'll make some new friends as well as catch up with longtime friends as well. I also want to thank all of my new and longtime friends who joined me in the CWK Cantina, and let you know how much I appreciate your help and encouragement, and love being able to give back to you with CWK Pour-Over, the exclusive weekly podcast not heard anywhere else. A big thank you to Smooth Rivera, Dan Capurso, Aaron, Jim Tallman, J.C. Poe, Ed Kimoto, Greg McLaughlin, Robert Avila, Dustin Mills, Yancey Evans, Chelsea Sansbury, Connie Chi, Tyler Pompa, Hannah, Alex Procasio, Ian Thompson, David Nicely, Simbad Defterdarian, Christine Turk, Ross Halliban, Kurt McKellen, Dan Ream, Colby Mead, Alexander Moylan, Frank Mulder, Blake Weaver, Jim Capron, Chris Metz, LJ Souter, Aaron Harris, Chris Kavarka, Jeff Ellis, Daz Davies, Susan Gray, Thea Selby, Christian Dale, Brian McKinney, Jason Hall, Jared Cantor, Eric Struthers, Mark Suter, Angela Sauce, and Dennis Keithley. If you want an additional way to help out the show, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/support and join us in the Coffee with Kenobi Cantina. It's a great way to support and help out the show, and 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to the St. Jude Children's Hospital to support the incredibly important work they are doing to help these brave children and their families. Plus, contributors at the CWK All-Star level can watch a video podcast of CWK Pour-Over hosted by me, Tom Gross, and Corey Clubb. In addition to being part of the community on Facebook, please don't forget to visit our website at www.coffeewithkenobi.com for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, live video, and so much more. If you have a question for me or just want to share your thoughts on the air, feel free to email me at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com, and I'll share them on the show. You can also connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zehr, MRZEHR. There are also a lot of ways to connect with me and Coffee with Kenobi on social media. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Give us a like on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi, and check us out on Pinterest. You can find me twice a month on the podcast Looking at Lucasfilm, part of the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, And you can find my writing on CWK's website, as well as StarWars.com, where I'm an official blogger there, as well as on IGN, where I contribute articles on Star Wars, as well as other pop culture topics. And if you're considering starting a podcast or a blog, let me know how I can help you get started and help you make your creative vision a reality. Be sure to check out danzmedia.com and we can get the process started. I am also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization to talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. I want to inspire you to be inspired. Don't be afraid to take that first step into a larger world. Thanks as always to our CWK sponsors, especially MEI and Mouse Fan Travel, our travel partner and your one-stop shop for all things Walt Disney World, Disneyland, the Disney Cruise Lines, or anywhere you want to go on the planet. Please go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel to book your magical vacation and help support Coffee with Kenobi in the process. If you like this show, please tweet out that you're listening, share it on Facebook, or invite your friends and family to tune in and share a cup of coffee with us. And if the Force is especially with you, please take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on iTunes or Google Podcasts. Every review makes a huge difference and helps to spread the word. Go to iTunes and search Coffee with Kenobi and you'll see the show there. My circle of friends has grown so much because of each and every one of you, and it means so much to me that we have such a wonderful Star Wars community. Aaron, obviously people are going to want to hear more from you and hear your Star Wars analysis. Let everybody know where they can find you and your great work. Awesome.
Well, best way to get a hold of me personally is Twitter. My personal Twitter is TAHarris121079. As Dan mentioned, I am the co-host of Star Wars Reactions. You can find us, our website's www.starwarsreactions.com. We're on Facebook and Twitter as well. So definitely give us a listen. And I know my co-host David would love to hear from you as well. We just like to sit back and have fun talking Star Wars, and that's literally all we do. So
I love it. And Ryder, what about you? Where can people reach out and listen to all your great podcasts?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Ryder Waldron DDS, and I also co-host the Idiots Array podcast, where we talk about Star Wars also, shocker. And I also co-host a dental podcast called the Dental Realist Podcast, if you want to hear me talk more about Darth Maul's teeth. We can do that.
I love it. Well, guys, thank you so much for being back on Coffee with Kenobi. I'd love to have you on anytime.
Thanks, Dan. Really a pleasure to be on this podcast with you.
Thank you so much, guys. And it's a pleasure to spend each and every week with all of you here at Coffee with Kenobi. It's such a great community to be a part of, and I'm so grateful for your kindness, for your generosity, and for your enthusiasm. It's great to insert that positivity and that analysis into the Star Wars fandom. I love it so very much. Again, be sure to join me Monday night at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. This week, we're going to do our top 5 favorite droids from the world of Star Wars, anything from the Legends line, from the films, the comics, the books, anything that is of the droid variety that you want to put on your list, please be sure to do so. I'll, of course, share your thoughts on the air, and you will not only be on our Facebook Live opportunity, but you will also get to be on YouTube and Instagram, where I put it there as well. If everyone listening to the show now followed us on Instagram and subscribed to our channel on YouTube, we would, my goodness, our numbers would go through the roof. So if you get a chance, please feel free to do so. It would mean so much to me and everyone here at Coffee with Kenobi. Have a wonderful week and weekend, and remember, this is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here. Move along. Move along.
Looking to catch up on the latest Star Wars books featuring sound effects and music directly from the movies? Star Wars audiobooks are the definitive listening experience. Try a Star Wars story you can only experience on audio with the brand new Star Wars audiobook original, Dr. Aphra, by Sarah Kuhn, read by an all-star cast including Mark Thompson, Catherine Tabor, Jonathan Davis, and more. Dr. Aphra is on sale now wherever audiobooks are sold.